Hey there! In this series we're going to cover how we can explore colorways using Substance Painter and get a nice beautiful render in Substance Stager like you see here. So to start off, we're going to be using this helmet model that I got from the Substance 3D Asset Library. And what we're going to be doing first is just applying a few base materials onto this form. So down here in my Libraries tab, I can actually search for materials if I need to look for one. And we have a couple really nice ones that come with the starter content. This plastic composite one's nice. It has a fun, cool little confetti type of material that we can use here. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to change the tiling of this confetti material. And what we're going to do next is actually instantiate it across different components of the model. What this lets us do is that if we change anything about that base material at any point, it will affect everything that it's linked to. So what you're seeing here is that I'm setting it to this bottom portion of the helmet itself. And down here, you can see that once I make a change in the parameters, it's affecting everything, both the initial form that I applied it to and the extra layer that's instantiated across. So that's going to help save us a ton of time when we get into exploring colorways a little bit later, but we're going to do a little bit more prep work, like adjusting the trim and the liner here. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a mask here because I don't want this confetti material to be applied across the entire form here. I just want it on the exterior shell. So with that mask applied, you'll notice that the default setting that I have here with these instantiated materials, it's not going to work because it's going to apply a mask to both the base form and to that secondary layer. But what we can do is actually create a folder and put our instantiated material into the folder itself and mask the folder. The reason why this works is that we're not touching that material, we're affecting the folder. So the folder is being unmasked, but that instantiated material is still being applied to both that form and the initial points that we have attached to it. Now you can see here that we have this nice shell that's actually masked out really well. And what I'm going to do next is actually apply materials to that liner and to the trim of the helmet. So next I'm going to go grab some foam. And I'm going to drag and drop this polystyrene foam into the liner of the helmet itself. We're going to be doing the same kind of setup for all of the components of this helmet, the liner and the trim itself. So the process, once we get a hang of it, is going to be fairly similar throughout the rest of this next part of the video. So here, again, we're going to do the instantiation. We're going to mask out a few different zones. We're going to have the material being applied to both the primary form of the helmet and that bottom section of the helmet. We're going to make a folder, we're going to drag that foam into the folder itself, and we're going to mask the folder and use our polygon selection tools to unmask those specific liner components. So I'm going to skip ahead here because we're going to do the exact same thing for the trim, with the goal being that the entire helmet has at least some materials being applied to all of the components of this. So now that we have materials applied to all the components of my helmet, let's explore how we can go ahead and adjust this and explore different colorways. First though, you can see that my lighting here is a little intense. The exposure is fairly strong here on this helmet, especially with the glossy white plastic. So I'm going to go here to my display settings. I'm going to go ahead and lower my exposure amount here, just so there's a little bit of a highlight, like a hot spot, but nothing overwhelming the form itself. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the background colors. If you're unfamiliar how to do this, if you go to Edit and Settings, you actually change the gradient mapping here underneath background color. So if you want something more darker or brighter depending on the colorways that you're working with, you can go ahead and do so here. Now that we have my background settings adjusted, I'm going to explore a few colorways, and you saw a little bit of this previously in the video, but in order to do that, we're going to go into my layers. We're going to find that original plastic composite material. And in the parameters for that original material, we can adjust the colors and everything will follow suit. This is super handy if you have a really complex piece like maybe a shoe or a car with multiple components. All of the associated materials will be updated live at the exact same time. You can also go ahead and make swatches down below here. And the way you do that is you find a color that you like. Once you find that hue from the hue picker, down in the swatches panel, there's that little plus icon. When we click on that, it will save that hue as is, and we can use that hue now in any other layer stack or any of the material we can use and color match. This is super handy when you want to make sure color consistency is important. So the foam and the shell itself, colored hue-wise, is the exact same. And we can also go ahead and change color properties on any of our components here to find a new color that makes it fun and interesting for us. So we got a good start here, but let's get into how we can apply and change some things with our graphics. Let's say that we want to apply some graphics onto that visor of the helmet itself, or we want to apply logos or decals onto this helmet. Let's go into our settings here and explore a few different ways to do that. So let's say what we want to do is create a gradient on this front panel visor looking piece of my helmet here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new fill layer, and in that fill layer I'm going to turn off all the channel properties except for color. Now the reason why I want to do that is because the way that the layer stack will work is that it will take the normal, roughness, and metallic information from the material below and any other material properties and push them up through our fill layer material, and the fill layer is only attributing color information into my material. So I have that fill layer created, I have everything but color selected, and what I'm going to do is apply mask and use my polygon selection tool to select those components of my front piece of the helmet, and you can see that that front piece is now unmasked. This is cool, but now I want to apply a gradient. One trick that we can do to apply a gradient besides making a paintbrush and feathering out our mask is using a tool called 3D Gradient Linear Fill. That tool is actually found in our little magic wand icon, but in order for it to work, what we need to do is actually have position data for our helmet here. So in order to get position data, we need to bake this mesh out. So baking might be more familiar with baking high poly maps or low poly maps, but when we do this process, we actually get position information along with other information that could be helpful for different generators, like curvature or thickness. Here, really, we only want position, but I'm going to go ahead and bake all my default maps out anyways. I'm going to go ahead and set my current settings up to at least 2K. 4K and 8K is great if you have really complex meshes, but I'm only going to do something fairly simple here, and 2K is going to be plenty enough for me. This is also a habit thing too. I'm just going to increase the secondary rays for my thicken, curvature, and ambient occlusion up just to get better quality out. In this case, we don't really need to do that, but it's just a habit and best practices while you're working. So skip ahead here, took about a minute or so to actually process through all the components in my helmet here. And now we have our helmet with our baked mesh map information. If we go ahead and we actually take a look at the position information of this helmet, you can see that our position information is represented with this gradient rainbow hue. In that 3D linear gradient modifier that I applied to that original mask, I can actually go ahead and select the start position and the end position here. And what that will do is it will control the direction of the gradient itself. So it's going to start from where I first color drop picked and then end where I did the secondary color drop pick. Here with the 3D linear gradient fill, I can actually change the balance, which actually controls how much of the gradient is being applied. And I can also invert that, so we're getting a rear to front or front to rear composition. Now, I don't want it to be applied everywhere, but we can also use our adjustment layers here to actually apply a multiply adjustment on top of our 3D linear gradient fill, and that will affect the mask selection that I originally made and apply that 3D linear gradient fill only on that selection. So now that everything's set up, the last part is actually exporting out a few of our colorways. This actually is going to be the shortest part of our conversation because once we have everything set up, changing colorways and changing things really drastically is very fast. So you've saw it up before. Once I have my swatches created, once I have my essential layers made, I can go ahead and change all of the components of my model. I can change the color of this gradient. I can change the amount of the gradient that we just saw a few seconds ago. I can go to that base form itself, change the different colors and change properties. And when I'm ready, I can go to the left here, hit on send to Stager, and in Stager itself, I can actually render out a clean image. So what we can do here, if we needed some beautiful renders, we can just send out a colorway with send to Stager, go back into Painter, make some adjustments, and when we click send to Stager again, it will make a new folder here in Stager itself for that second model, because it's going to consider each colorway two different models. And we can go ahead and rinse and repeat to get all the colors that we're looking for out of Painter and into Stager for a nice quick render. I'm just going ahead and delete some of those buckles there. They came with the helmet, but I didn't really want to showcase them. Not really as aesthetically pleasing here. But I'm going to go back into Painter, change some colorways, and just have fun with it. Again, you can do anything you want here at this point. You can apply more graphics, more decals, more effects, but the result here is actually really easy tools for you to change your colorways very quickly. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions or want to see any further topics discussed, let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to get to them.